My name is Johann Hattingh. I am Chief Editor of IBFD's Bulletin for International Taxation. The journal is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year with a special issue that will be released in November on the title of 75 Years of International Taxation, Looking Back and Looking Ahead. I'm delighted today to welcome with me Professor Jinyan Li from Osgood Law School at York University in Canada, and she is one of the contributors to this special issue. And before we talk about her article, I should say that Professor Li, already from the 1980s, were writing and publishing in the Bulletin and helping readers make sense of particularly the position of China in the international tax system. So her article for the special issue is entitled China's Rising and the United States' Declining Influence in Global Tax Governance. Welcome, Jinyan.
Thank you.
So I want to start by asking you, it seems obvious, but what motivated you to specifically write on the relationship of the US and China for this special issue of the Bulletin?
Yeah, well, firstly, I was honored to be invited to contribute a piece to this special volume. Then I was thinking about my career and the Bulletin, and then my career and China's development in tax is so closely interconnected. And then I was watching the Alaska diplomatic meeting where the Chinese diplomat stood up to the American Secretary of State and said, China is now your equal and you have no right to talk down to us, you know, we're equals. So that triggered me to think about the history of Chinese international taxation and then the role of governance in the international tax arena. So I thought, as you said, I started writing for the Bulletin in the 1980s. So I started to reflect and I thought there's a common theme that China's rising influence in some ways, but at least it's notable. Like China is now trying to make its position known and try to say what is a good policy in international tax. So I thought it's a good opportunity to review and reflect, maybe project a little about the future, but we are tax scholars. We're not good at projecting things, but I thought since this is a great opportunity to reflect, this topic seems like a good topic for readers.
Yes, the article is wonderful and meticulous in the way you chart the historical development of the Chinese tax system and in parallel what the US at the same time were doing in terms of its influence over global reforms and also its own internal tax reforms. So I wanted to start by asking about the history. You seem to view the period from 1980 onwards initially as one where China is the so-called norm taker. And I wonder if you can explain to us what you mean by that term.
Yes, international taxation, as we all know, is a field that doesn't have any proper public international law instrument to regulate it. So international taxation is governed by norms, well accepted standards and principles and norms that we can see represented in the model tax treaties, for instance. But there's no public international body to adjudicate tax disputes. There's no lawmaking body at the international level. So China, I regarded China as a norm taker in the 1980s because China wanted to open its economy to foreign investors, and foreign investors wanted to know what Chinese income tax system was at that time because they wanted to know what is their income after they make profit in China, what is China's share and what is the investor's share. So China needed to introduce income tax law as part of the package to create a legal environment for foreign investors to invest and operate in China. And China had nowhere to turn except the international norms. So China look at what foreign countries do and look at the model treaties and adopted the general international tax norms into Chinese domestic law. So that's why I call it China was a norm taker, because those norms served China's interest. And China never had modern income taxation until 1980. So it looked around, and China realized very wisely that China couldn't create its own income tax system in a way that attract foreign investors, because foreign investors are familiar with the corporate tax system, personal income tax system they know in their home country. So that's why China adopted international norms, and this practice worked quite well for China. And of course, you know that China being quite unique in so many ways, China has never wholeheartedly or wholesale embracing international norms. China has always modified international norms to suit China's needs. But China as a norm taker, I think in terms of international tax rules, was quite evident in the beginning.
And so when did it all start to change? You seem to attach significance to the global financial crisis, and at that point in time, perhaps a change took place.
Yes, the global financial crisis is a very interesting event, historical event, in the sense that you know, there's a saying, no crisis should be wasted, and so crises trigger good things, reconsideration of things. But in the case of the global financial crisis in 2008, it was really, from hindsight at least, a historical opportunity for China to step up, because the Chinese economy was relatively safe from the global financial crisis, and Chinese economy was already accounting a big part of the global economy. So while other countries were struggling fiscally and economically, but China was doing really well. And also Chinese corporate tax system was reformed in a significant manner in 2007. So, and after quite a few years of working with WTO requirements, liberalizing Chinese market, so China was in a position actually to assert influence because of its domestic situation and the global financial crisis. From the literature I read in Chinese, I could see that Chinese confidence in China's ability at the global stage increased a lot. And like a Chinese model, Chinese future has some value in the global community. What China has been doing seems to be right. And so Chinese people got more confidence in what they are doing. And I think it's globally, there are more and more Chinese initiatives. So I see the global financial crisis as a game changer in terms of confidence, how Chinese model, Chinese alternative was looked at by Chinese and also by Western people as well, I think.
Yes, it's, if I may, you call that the period of China becoming a norm shaker, which is wonderfully descriptive.
Yes, because China worked with the UN Technical Tax Committee, expert committee, and then China started to use the UN manual on transfer pricing for developing countries to articulate its transfer pricing position. So that officially happened in 2013. So it took a few years for China to consolidate its thinking, and then when it was mature enough, it was put in the official document representing, you know, the alternative path to the OECD on transfer pricing. Not alternative path, at least some different views about how to implement the arm's length principle in developing countries. So China took the opportunity to articulate its view, and that was I think the most notable dimension of China's position on international taxation.
Yes, which is clear enough. But if we now forward to today and the current global tax reforms that are being discussed and ironed out, It seems to me that you say that China's position is not so clear in some of the some of the proposals, and perhaps we could start with Pillar 2, the proposal for a global minimum tax. How do you see China's stance on Pillar 2?
Yes, Chinese position, the way I see it has been changing. We mentioned about the global financial crisis, and then the BEPS, the initial BEPS project, China took a very clear position, like value creation principle, profit should be taxed where economic activities take place, because China was the factory of the world, and then the marketplace of the world, high-end products. So China believed strongly that where people and assets are, profit should be located. It's not where there's a legal vehicle saying the profit should be recorded there. So China believed in this principle and advocated apparently strongly for the BEPS project to embrace the value creation principle, because it's quite consistent with the Chinese approach to looking at where profit is made, and it was clearly stated in the UN manual. So BEPS 1, China was very active, but then BEPS 2, the Pillar 2 you mentioned, then it's kind of what Pillar 2 is trying to achieve is not exactly consistent with China's interest in seeing how the international tax rules evolve, because China still sees itself as a developing country. It needs to attract and develop technology, and it still needs global capital, even though China is also exporting capital. So the global minimum tax is perceived to be kind of affecting a country's sovereignty in using tax incentives, in using ways to incentivize investment in certain areas and certain regions, certain sectors. So I think that's a major concern. And I think that's why the enthusiasm in supporting Pillar 2 was not as high as supporting BEPS 1, like supporting the value creation principle. And also I have to say that conceptually, the global minimum tax may be perceived to be contradictory to the value creation principle, because the assumption is the home country, the headquarters home country, has the right to claim stateless income, or income that is not taxed at the global minimum rate. And China's belief in value creation principle is profits should always go to where profits was created, not where the ultimate capital owner is. So in that sense, I could appreciate why China's position on Pillar 2 was not as exciting as the one with BEPS 1. But having said that, I think since I finished the draft of the paper, we know China has already clearly stated that it's supporting the two-pillar solution, including Pillar 2, because the multilateral approach to solving global tax issues is considered to be more important, I guess, than affecting China's fiscal interest. So China now is again playing the big country leadership role and saying multilateralism is better, even though it's not really perfect, it may not be that perfect for Chinese domestic policy at this moment.
That's really fascinating. Can we then also for a moment reflect on Pillar 1 and how you see China's positioning towards that proposal?
Yeah, Pillar 1 is more consistent with value creation principle. If I could use value creation principle as an organizing thought, Pillar 1 is perceived to be consistent with value creation principle if you regard data, consumer user created data, to be a source of profit, and also profit realization through sales is an important element of value creation. So there is a consistency between Pillar 1's approach to value creation principle. But practically speaking, Pillar 1 may not be very good for China's fiscal position because China, other than US, China has the second largest digital firms and multinational corporations. So the Chinese multinational corporations will be subject to Pillar 1. In the meantime, though, China is third largest market, I think after US and EU. So in a way, China will lose some if Chinese-based multinationals are taxed in other jurisdictions, but China also gains from being the world's largest market and having foreign multinationals selling goods and services in China. But the economic impact is, I haven't seen any economic impact of Pillar 1 on China yet. And I don't know what the number would look like, but just at a high level, I could see Pillar 1 China could be a winner and could be a giver and a taker at the same time. And in the future, if Chinese multinationals continue to grow and continue to, more and more Chinese multinationals will exceed the threshold and be captured by Pillar 1, I guess sometime down the road, China may be similar to the US under Pillar 1. At the moment, it may not be that close to US, but compared to all other jurisdictions in the world, I can see that other than US, China is the second country in terms of having its multinationals being taxed under Pillar 1. So it's a complex story. It's not a straightforward answer like some other countries that already have a DST. So Pillar 1 is easy calculation. For China, is complicated calculation, just like the US.
I guess in a sense, it reflects the transformation of the Chinese economy.
Yes, and then the Chinese economy is, if the transformation continues, like by 2025, Chinese economy is highly digitalized and Chinese digital companies continue to expand, like TikTok and Alibaba, Tencent, and then they will be more and more like Google, Facebook, and then they will maybe Amazon. They will be subject to tax in other countries. So in that case, Pillar 1 will help China by eliminating DST threats, but then the Pillar 1 profit allocation will kick in and allocate Chinese profit to market jurisdictions. Again, I guess at the high level, because this is a global challenge, and having a global solution to it just makes sense in terms of the Chinese overall view of the world. Like President Xi mentioned at the UN Assembly speech, multilateralism, solving global pollution problems through multilateral approach is the right approach. So in that sense, even though technically, fiscally, there may be issues, but at a high level, this is, I think, consistent with China's view of itself in the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis in the political discussion around the global reforms on prospects for implementation, and a lot of that is in the context of the US. But I wanted to ask you about implementation in China, because you mentioned it in the article also. Is this just to be assumed that China will just implement these proposals? Will there be, what needs to happen for this to become acceptable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was extremely hesitant in writing this part in the paper because it is really hard to know. What I could go on was what China did with the multilateral instrument experience. And China was supportive of the negotiation of that convention, and China ratified it as the first group of countries that ratify the multilateral instrument. But and China's treaties were modified by incorporating the provisions. But apparently China has not yet taken the legal steps in officially ratifying. that multilateral instrument. So, and in China, maybe the effect is not that different, whether China ratify it or not, but in terms of implementing BEPS 1 measures, treaty abuse measures. But for this Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, I don't know how China will approach this, because as I said, it's a double-edged sword, both Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, with respect to China's fiscal and economic position. And there's gains and losses, but at an international political level, being part of the multilateral initiative is good. And it's, I think, what China wants to do to be a responsible big country. But fiscally, economically, and legally, how is that going to be translated into operation? It's really hard to see.
I want to ask you about the responsible big country and the future of how you see China positioning itself towards the United States and towards the OECD and other historical norm setters. Where do you see China?
It's hard to see clearly, but I from reading the Chinese literature, I have a sense that there's strong support for utilizing genuine international organizations as opposed to the wealthy country clubs like the OECD. So the United Nations is a natural institution for China to support and to try to bring about some meaningful changes or solutions to global problems. And China has worked with the UN Tax Committee and used the UN Manual on Transfer Pricing to launch its position, its views on transfer pricing. So I see that China may continue working with the OECD and with the Global Forum and the existing institutions, but China may be interested in creating a genuine, from the perspective of non-OECD countries, a genuine international body that can take charge in creating global solutions to these global tax challenges. So that's as to how that can be done. I guess there are different ways for China to take a leadership. And China also, I think, has gained more respect and influence through the Belt and Road Initiative, through this BRITACON, this Belt and Road Initiative tax administration cooperative mechanism, because it's organized tax administrators in terms of training, in terms of sharing information, resolving disputes. So China is taking a leadership role on the ground in that area and is gaining some experience. It's no longer just, China wishes to do some things. China has been practicing effecting change. So I think now China may see the opportunity to utilize the UN and then try to do some meaningful international tax reform through organizations like the UN. But it doesn't mean China is not working with the OECD, and China has been working very closely with the OECD and IBFD as well. As a norm taker in the beginning, now I think more as a partner, as a collaborator.
Indeed, very much so. Jinyan Li, thank you very much for your time, for making us at IBFD as readers, making sense of what goes on in China for such a long period. It's invaluable to have your guidance and your insights. Thanks for sharing these today with us.